Hello there my music lovers, I'm Josh from audiophile-heaven and today we are doing a review on the SMSL AO200. This unit is provided to us for a review by Aoshida Audio, which is one of the best shops in the world. I'm actually really thankful for Aoshida for being patient with me, because I did a review on their NF audio EMs. It was a full written review and I delayed it so much. I was so slow with doing the review on them because I kept receiving new stuff that I had to push because they were considerably more expensive and people were asking me about them. I'm really thankful to Aoshida for giving me the chance of reviewing the SMSL AO200. This is a really nice speaker amplifier. So today's unit costs about $280 US. It can be shipped from anywhere, it can be found on Amazon too and AliExpress, but I totally recommend you to purchase it from Aoshida Audio. They just provide another level of warranty and overall support. Back to the review, this is the unit, this is how it looks like. It is an horizontal unit, it should be used like this. It cannot be placed vertically, it doesn't look very natural. It has a beautiful display at the front, a volume wheel, which is digital, so it can turn infinitely. And at the back we have a full palette of choices. We have balanced inputs, we have RCA inputs, we have a subwoofer output, we have an antenna jack, we have a USB input, we have the speaker outputs, and we have the power plug. There is just so much that can be done with the AO200. Like, this is a speaker amplifier. It is very well made, as you can see. Very well made, very heavy actually, it is quite heavy. You can feel where the power converter is. The unit has about 50 watts of actual power at 8 ohms, which is probably the most important of its characteristics. It should be able to drive any single pair of bookshelf speakers in the sub $2,000 to $3,000 US price range. Anything in that area should be drivable from the AO200. It has a very good amount of power, which means extremely good dynamics, especially with loud and expressive musics, and it tends to struggle a bit with very quiet music where everything sounds pretty much at the same level. So I do recommend it for rock and metal in general, it is quite good there. And I totally recommend you to use the balanced inputs more than the single-ended inputs. Starting with the most obvious part of it, the power. It consumes 5 watts of power in idle and about 40 watts nominal, which is quite good for an amplifier that can provide 50 watts of maximum power. The company has rated that at the maximum draw it can draw 300 watts peak power, which is quite cool too. The unit is also very resistant to scratches. As you can see, I've placed it pretty much everywhere you can dream of and it still did not scratch, like at all. It is perfect, it is immaculate. And let's start to talk about the features, because there is so much to explore with it. Going from left to right, like our typical writing, we have the balanced inputs, which tend to sound best. This is the best way to use it, via its balanced inputs, and it is the input I recommend the most on it. Using it in single-ended does not sound quite as good. It is actually quite a bit less interesting than the balanced input. The balanced input tends to have the best soundstage, best overall instrument separation, best technicalities, best textures. It just sounds best in general. It is the most resolute sound. Everything else just seems to be crushed on the single-ended input, so you should use EXLR cables if you can, and if your DAC can output in balanced EXLR connectors. It has a subwoofer output, but you are unable to configure the cutoff frequency, so you should use an active subwoofer that lets you enable that. It is made for active subwoofers. It sends the analogic signal, but it doesn't send power or enough power to power a passive subwoofer. There are very few passive subwoofers out there, so happily you shouldn't make that mistake. We have a USB input, and the USB input can be used for two things. You can play music off a USB flash drive or external HDD, situation in which it starts playing the songs, it goes straight through them. You have no option to shuffle, no option to select the song. It is pretty minimalistic, but it exists. And you can actually use it as a USB DAC for your smartphone or computer. It is immediately recognized by a Windows computer. It just sees it, it just recognizes it, and it starts playing music through it, which is so awesome. I mean, what other device can do that? The sound on the USB input is quite disappointing, sadly. The sound on the USB input is nowhere near as good as it is through the balanced inputs. The sound on the USB input is more constrained, the soundstage is more intimate, everything is more spatially compressed, there is less instrument separation. In general, the sound tends to lose some clarity and some transparency. I totally recommend using it on the balanced inputs rather than the USB input. Don't be lazy, you surely have a better DAC than this. If you are purchasing an almost $300 amplifier for your speakers, and if you have speakers, you must have a DAC. I mean, you have to have a better DAC than the AO200. USB input seems to be more of a second thought that was added because it is cool to have it, like it is cool to have it if you don't have a DAC or until you purchase a DAC, but I wouldn't make it my main. You wouldn't know how good this can sound. We have the speaker outputs, which are your usual speaker connectors. Quite tiny actually, they are tinier than most speaker connectors, which makes installing speakerware a bit difficult. My speakerwares tend to be fatter than this and it tends to be a complicated operation, and it has an antenna for Bluetooth. But the Bluetooth connection is limited to AAC and SBC, no aptX or LDAC, which means that the quality over the Bluetooth connection is not the best. The quality over the Bluetooth connection is pretty similar to that of the DAC, and the internal DAC of the AO200 is at fault for that. So I really do not recommend using its internal DAC. So don't use the single-ended input in RCA, don't use the USB, and don't use the Bluetooth. It is heavily advertised to have those, but I really do not recommend using them if you want to have the best experience with it. On the other hand, when you do use the balanced input, the sound tends to be very energetic, very fast. It is one of the fastest amplifiers I've heard in my entire life. This thing can throw punches at your speakers. It is incredibly detailed and refined for the price point. It is extremely fast, but it is also quite flat in the overall tuning. There is no special emphasis on bass or on the treble. I've come to expect a bit more emphasis on bass and the treble. It has an AQ profile, which you can enable at any time. So there is some processing going on the inside, and enabling or disabling the AQ profile does not degrade the sound. So you can actually enable it freely. It has a user mode where you can bump both the bass and the treble, and that sounds much better than using it on its default setting. I totally recommend you to tinker a bit with the AQ profile. On its own, it sounds extremely flat, like it is so flat, everything is just flat, but it is extremely quick. The bass is very, very fast, very, very punchy, very, very uplifting. The mid-range is very linear. It is more euphonic with male voices and with sounds that are dominated by the bass, with heavier sounding instruments. While with sounds like pianos, there tends to be a bit of a lack of shimmer. It tends to not have quite that sparkle that I tend to desire from music. If you increase the treble via its own AQ, if you use the user profile, then it tends to have a much better presentation of pianos and violins and even female voices, so it tends to sound better. That one emphasizes more the upper mid-range and lower treble rather than the actual treble, but the unit already has an excellent extension in the upper treble, so you are never going to run out of room or of space or of air. The sound is quite airy, and if using the proper balanced connector, the sound has a beautiful soundstage. It is natural in size, medium towards large, so it is a medium soundstage edging on large. It tends to have an excellent amount of instrument separation, instrument definition. Everything is just really awesome with it. It has that very quick and technical sound. If I was to describe its sound, it is analytical and technical. It is not the most euphonic of sounds, and at this price point I was expecting it to be more likely a sound that's really euphonic but lacks detail and lacks speed, and a sound that's lazy, but it is pretty much everything else. It is not very euphonic, but it is extremely quick, it is very technical, it has very good edges, very good instruments, very good overall textures. Everything just plays through the AO200. It can face any music. It is great for metal, for technical death metal, for brutal metal. It is great for EDM, it is great for pop. I would not really recommend it for classical or for jazz, because the overall sound tends to be quite fast, and that tends to affect the sound if you listen to classical. Notes don't really have that bloom or that tail that follows every single musical note. Everything is just a bit faster than you'd expect it to be, and for jazz and for classical that doesn't work out so well. The AO200 is a really good amplifier. I mean, if you have $300, this wasn't even possible a while ago. It relies on class D, which means that it consumes very little compared to the kind of sound it produces, and with the rising prices of gas and of energy in Europe, they are killing me and everyone else. The rising prices of energy, the AO200 is actually a great unit to have around because it will consume less. I personally don't care so much about the power consumption, but I do consider class D to be worthy of considering. Even my speakers that I'm using right now, the Adam Audio T7V speakers, are actually self-powered and they run in class D. So yeah, I do trust class D to do some damage. The sound of the AO200 will turn every slouch of a speaker, every slow speaker into a quick rabbit, and it is going to make everything so much more fun for all music lovers around the world. I hope that you've enjoyed this video. I hope you'll consider subscribing to Audiophile-Heaven. Also leave a like on this video if you enjoyed the content. I hope you'll consider donating to Audiophile-Heaven. I do have a link in the video description. Any help is deeply appreciated and I'm really thankful to anyone helping. Don't forget to check out our Shida store for more awesome deals. Don't forget that the AO200 is most likely the best speaker amplifier I've heard in the $300 price range. I heard a few others like some Taga Harmony ones, but this one is the best. This one doesn't really have any background noise, which is really cool because the Taga Harmony I did hear and I did try to review a while ago, but I actually stopped midway because it was not powerful enough. It made me give up on entry-level speaker amplifiers, but the AO200 actually brought that light to life again. It makes me want to review more. Chi-Fi stuff is really incredible, especially the DACs and the amps in Chi-Fi. EMs are actually okay. Most of them are really cool, but okay. If you want some really cool EMs, you have to go to the flagship section in every single country, not just in China. Everything needs to be the best it can be. At any rate, I really hope you have the loveliest of weeks in there, and I hope your time here has been an enjoyable one. Bye bye!